Everyone, welcome back to the Knockdown Radio Podcast. For those of you just joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those who listened to or watched the first episode with Shihan Reid, thank you very much for your support and for all the great feedback. Today, I'm joined online from Shihan Yasu Yahiro from Sydney. Yasu, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation.
Now, I've known Yasu for over a quarter of a century now, which I'm sure makes both of us feel pretty old. We first met at the Australian National Tournament where, from memory, I think you were only 16 at the time and had only been training in Kyokushin for around 3 months after transferring from another style. And despite that, you competed in the men's open lightweight division and absolutely dominated. Yasu then went on to have a very successful competitive career and is now a branch chief in Sydney and also acting as Australian national team coach. Now, Yasu is not only a great fighter and coach, but also has a great karate analytical mind and is a real student of the game. So I thought it would be great to get you on and discuss some recent tournaments, talk about the fights, the fighters, and what the results may mean for future events. And if this goes well, maybe we can make it a semi-regular thing. Before we do that, Yasu, perhaps for those who might not be familiar with you, if you could just provide a bit of background on yourself.
Yeah. So basically, I'm just living and doing karate in Australia, in Sydney. I started Kyokushin when I was just turned 16, and that was my birthday present from my dad. And also, it was a promise with my late Shihan Yasu to start Kyokushin after he left for Japan. So right after that, so the dojo moved to West Ryde, Sensei Frank Russo. I trained with him, and my competitive years were from 2001 to 2010. Haven't lost in Australia between lightweight and middleweight, but I got my best result was All Japan third place.
Yeah.
But couldn't really get anything in the world stage. And 2010, I lost to the the later famous Maeda Yuki in the quarterfinals, and that was my last go. And while I was young, I thought, maybe starting coaching at a young age so I could kind of, keep up to the young ones and try and give them more kind of, more advice, which is more realistic than, looking back at what I used to do like 20 years ago. So, yeah. And then from then on, I was national coach. Yeah. And just been doing that for about, 15 years now and enjoying it. Finally starting to get some results coming out. Yeah.
That's terrific. And perhaps in a future episode, we can talk a little bit about that, how you sort of transferred from another style, your relationship with the late, great Shihan Yasu, and also how you're sort of structuring your dojo and, how you're starting to see some results from people like Tiger Hart, who's now really starting to challenge on the world stage. But today, we're going to talk about a couple of recent tournaments. We had 2 major tournaments within the Shinkyokushin organization, and in the future, I would like to discuss tournaments from other organizations as well. I think there's a lot to learn from each other, and there's always slight differences and nuances, and there are obviously great fighters from outside our organisation as well. That being said, we didn't want to overwhelm ourselves today. I know there's been something like 4 European tournaments over the last couple of weeks. So today we're sticking with the WKO European Championships and the JFKO All Japan tournament that took place over last weekend. We're going to go through division by division and discuss some of the highlights and standout performances. But before we do that, Yasu, just from a general perspective, were there any broad themes or trends that stood out to you from either tournament?
Well, the All Japan, I thought, even the Europeans, the level is very high, I thought, and the speed and intensity is much more different than when we were competing. And it's that it was interesting to see that even though, the level I thought was very close amongst all divisions, but still the winners were fairly consistent, which means probably they're doing something that's, keeping them on top of everyone else. And what was interesting, what I thought was actually the amount of southpaws that won all the divisions was actually quite surprising.
Really?
If you look at the men's, Toda was southpaw, Ortsbo was southpaw, Keijiro was southpaw, Sawai was, started southpaw, and, there were bases, a lot of them was the left kick, which maybe, that put something one step ahead of everyone else.
Yeah, and what do you think that sort of offers as a tactical advantage? Is it from an offensive perspective, you're just hitting a different side of the body, or is it from a defensive perspective, makes you harder to hit? What are some of the tactical advantages you think that these fighters that are employing a southpaw stance are getting?
I think Shihan Yuji Shimamoto, had started the trend where you have to be able to do both left and right. So he's able to switch from left and right, which is very amazing to see. But then And then again, I was also have got a chance to learn from Lucas Kubilius from Lithuania, and he was a very statistic-minded guy, and he said that the statistics of someone doing this. So if you practice retaliating against this, is will raise your advantage over other people. And I thought most people are right-handed, which means left orthodox is going to be, that's why it's called orthodox probably, but orthodox is going to be the most main style. So people being able to train against the southpaw might be less frequent, which might make it a little bit harder for them to adapt. And as in Japan, if you get pushed back a little bit, that's going to make a big decision. And then the way to actually push someone back against left leg in front, right leg in front might make a little bit of difference. But on top of that, those won it. I thought they had some sort of something unique against what the others can do. So they all had some sort of specialty technique, which I thought was quite interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the level of the competition, and one thing that sort of stood out to me, when we were fighting, even in the round of the quarterfinals, a round of 16 for something like the All Japan Weight Division tournament, we were still having to do like 3 minutes, possible third extension, so a total of 9 minutes. And now, even from the quarterfinals, you're doing 2 2-minute rounds, and that's it. They have to make a decision. And I understand why they have to do it. They're trying to condense the tournament from an entertainment perspective and a product perspective. Not everyone wants to sit through one after another 9-minute fights. But from an athlete perspective, it really does change the fight. It's, you're not getting as many of those fights decided by stamina. And I think, the fouls start to have a little bit bigger impact. And we know that they're getting stricter with fouls. So if there's nothing in it, if there's a little bit of pushing, a little bit of hooking, then that fighter is likely to lose. And I also think that the rush becomes more important, the way that you're rushing, the variety of rush tactics you have, and even from a strength and conditioning perspective, the energy systems focus maybe becomes a little bit different. You really need to have that explosiveness to use the rush to be able to win. So, yeah, that really stood out to me. I think it was particularly evident the first 3 fights of the day in the men's under 60 kilo division. I think they were all split decisions. This sort of shows how even the level is, how close it was, but it also shows how hard it is to make those decisions, particularly when you've only got 4 minutes of data to work with.
It's like, I don't know how they made those decisions either. Like, it's very hard to see. Then if they're so, desperate to make a decision, of course, name or fame comes into play. So maybe that's one of the reasons why the winners don't really change much. And you watch carefully, trying to decide who won amongst those guys. Like, it's really hard, especially the lightweight divisions, I thought. So, the significance of Chui is going to become much more than what you expect it to be. But again, I think it's just preference of what the referees and judges like. And even though we still think of that way, but I think like a general audience will really be able to tell who really won or lost. Like, just watching those fights is really hard, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, that the rush then just becomes so important. And having the ability to, I guess, have a stronger and more aggressive and faster rush than your opponent, but also have some different strings to your bow in terms of the rush and be able to change up what you're doing. And we saw that, and we can talk about that in regards to a couple of different fighters, but there were some fighters that were able to change the way that they were rushing across the tournament, depending on the opponent they were up against. And, instead of, you've got basically your Shitatsky, Hizageti rush, but then starting to circle a little bit more, starting to use a little bit more get-on based on what was coming back at you. And also the ability to sort of be defensive in the rush as well. So be able to not necessarily clinch or grab, but get into what I call a clinch in range. So you're basically sort of chest on chest, and you're using that as a defensive tactic to nullify your opponent's rush as well. That's one thing that stood out from the European tournament was, and I'm not sure whether this was just sort of watching the highlights coming through on social media, but there seemed to be a lot of body shot Wazari and Ippon. And I'm not sure whether this sort of speaks to the gap in, I guess, depth between the All Japan and the European tournament, where perhaps there's just more of a consistent level in Japan. and whether it was just sort of the earlier rounds. But we saw a lot of people go down with body shots, and even in the middleweight final, the fight was decided very quickly from a body shot.
So as you said, I reckon that the level difference amongst the top four and the rest is much bigger than we thought it would be. So I think the other Western European countries are getting left behind quite a bit compared to like Georgia, Azerbaijan, Hungary, Bulgaria, Lithuania, Poland. Like especially look at the final, the top four of the heavyweight. I should say top three. So Paulius Zamantas, Eventas Gujauskas, Maciej Mazur, and it's the rest. I mean, there was just nowhere near where they can go. Like the level was just too different that it just felt bad for those guys to even compete in that stage.
Yeah, perhaps that's a good segue into talking about the first division, the men's heavyweight, and maybe starting with the European tournament. It was great to see Maciej Mazur come back and win the European Championships after a couple of years of poorer performance from him. He seemed like he was back to his best. He had got that highlight reel knockout in the earlier rounds, and then won his other fights fairly convincingly, but with a very sort of tactical approach. Against Zimantas, Zimantas is an interesting fighter. He's obviously incredibly powerful. He's a scary dude, massive guy, and looks like he hits incredibly hard. But it sort of seems like as soon as he comes up against someone who can handle his power and he's not able to hurt, I'm not sure whether he loses confidence or whether he just doesn't have enough other weapons to fall back on. He doesn't have the rush. He doesn't quite have the volume. And even though he wins his fights very, very easily, it looks like he does take a fair bit of low kick damage. I always sort of look into earlier rounds and think, oh God, Zimantas looks terrifying and looks like he might go all the way here, but he always sort of comes up against a sticking point at some point. I'd hate to fight him. He looks like he causes a lot of damage, but I think he needs to expand his game a little if he really wants to be a world champion.
I think the KCC will test him a little bit more. So the two losses he had so far was I think it's consecutively low kick knockouts, isn't it? From Goto, at least what we've seen. Goto knocked him out, and then maybe he fought in the last European, which I can't remember how he went. But then now Mazur knocked him out with the low kick, so everyone's probably going for his legs now.
Yeah.
And I think I was watching Mazur's fight. I saw him trip, and I thought maybe he damaged his legs when he was falling over. He couldn't get up very quickly, so I was wondering if that was anything to do with it. But
may have had an injury there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely there's something with this, leg that everyone's going to try and cut him down on. So. But I don't want to touch him with his punches or his back kicks. They're very accurate. They're very strong. So if he got the body to survive that, probably there's plenty of chance to go around it. But for those other European heavyweights that are struggling to get near him, he's probably going to have a kind of an easier time with them until he meets someone that's somewhat similar to his level, probably.
Yeah, and then Eventas obviously looked very strong in the earlier rounds, got through very easily, looked very measured, well-paced. But then when he came up against Mazur in the final, he started off very well, but then got a chewy. And then after he got that chewy, he was pushing a little bit. It's almost like he couldn't use that same sort of pushing strategy to set up his low kicks. And I think, as we talked about the judging being stricter now on fouls, I think the fighters are recognizing the impact of fouls. And once they've got one foul, there's that threat of getting again 10. And it, I think, makes a bigger change in their fighting strategy compared to before. And so because he wasn't able to use that same tactic, Mazur had a chance to land some body shots, and Eventas was clearly hurt. And I think that, Mazur was also hurt to the legs, but he was able to use those body shots to nullify some of Eventas's leg kick attacks as well.
No, I thought Mazur's timing with his knees, like whenever Eventas was about to put on a couple more, those knees from Mazur completely stopped him, going any further. And then Mazur's timing with knees, then punch straight away. Like I thought that is very tactically skillful. Like he wouldn't let Eventus get on a roll. So he probably did a lot of research on him as well. But when Eventus has that left hand push, and then the Shitasuke comes in, and then then he starts kneeing and flurrying it through. Like Mache kept on stopping him before everything starts happening, and then he started driving it through his pace. So I thought it was very cleverly kind of managed by Mache. At the same time, I saw Juventus also after the G wasn't really in his game either. But he also has a lot of ups and downs in his fights. He's not always great. He's sometimes what's he doing, and sometimes oh my god, this guy's crazy.
Yeah. And with the All Japan, it was interesting. You had the top 4 seeds, none of them making the semi-finals. We have to talk about Yuta Goto first. I'm not sure if you've heard anything about his injury or what actually happened.
I heard he fractured his shin, but I don't know, he completely snapped it or, but he needs a surgery, so I'm pretty sure it's quite significant.
Yeah. Yeah, look, if that is the injury, a tibial fracture, that's a tough one. As a physiotherapist, we've seen a few of these injuries in both in karate and other combat sports. Yoshida Tomikazu, I think, did his in the 2007 World Championship. He had Nicholas Pettis do it in a kickboxing fight later in his career. Anderson Silva's probably the highest profile one against Chris Weidman, and then a couple of years later, Chris Weidman did it himself. It's a shocking injury. It's a horrific injury. It's a horrific injury to watch for the crowd. Luckily, when you've got the gi pants on, it sort of hides some of that freakish bending. But, coming back from that, the thing is, no one really comes back the same. You tend not to come back to the same level. Once you've had, for us, our shins is one of our main weapons, and to have that thing snapped in half and then put a steel rod through it, it's a massive barrier mentally to get back to using that as your main weapon. And so for Goto, I think he's 27 at the moment. Obviously, we wish him all the very best, but it's really going to test him. And then Yuki Okada, he's obviously very talented, very skillful heavyweight, uses a lot of flashy kicks, uses a lot of footwork. It seemed like he was even a little more evasive than usual. Obviously, in last year's All Japan, he got a lot of low kick damage, and I don't know what his tactic was. Maybe he was trying to avoid some of that low kick attacks in the early rounds. I think that on the first day, he was using a lot more footwork, and obviously does that very well. But when he came up against Suzuki Kordai, he was a bit overwhelmed by that rush. And obviously, if you're using that footwork, if someone then puts on the rush, you need to be able to have that switch, which I think Keijiro did very well, which we'll talk about in a second. But it seems like he was just overwhelmed by that pressure when he came up against Suzuki.
No, I think there was one moment where he actually, I think I saw pain in his face when he copped a kick from Suzuki Kordai at one stage, and then his foot and his legs completely stopped. So it's probably. Yeah, so I think, again, same as Paulius, but his legs is probably one of the key factors of him being able to fight or not, because I think there's a lot of drive from his legs for him to actually move and get his techniques through.
Yeah.
And last time, of course, it wasn't like a very, very strong draw. They had to fight through for the JFKO International. And then this year, everyone was really tough. And last year, so the All Japan, that... top four, wasn't it? I think he got to top 4. No, top 8 was it? Top 4.
All Japan last year, yeah, top 4. Lost to Yusaku.
Yeah. So I think he just hasn't got enough durability to actually get through to win like a major title. So KCC is great because only 3 fights for him, and then that's I think just ideal for him. But when it comes to like JFK or the All Japan, it just seems like he needs a little bit more in his bag. Not just techniques, but something that can actually withstand other people's attacks. I think that's going to be the key for him from here onwards.
Yeah, and I think a similar sort of thing could be said for Takahashi. I think he did an amazing job. He looking the first day at Katagiri, he looked amazing. He had this tight defense, very smothering sort of style. But then Takahashi was able to wear him down with those body punches. He has that style. He's able to obviously put on the pressure, wear a lot of attacks, and then sort of draw his opponents into that infighting style, and then sort of wear them down with the body punches. But then at the same time, he is also copying a lot of low kick damage, and that was sort of evident in the final when he came up against Torda. And so, yeah, if you're fighting sort of KCC and there's only 3 rounds, you can probably utilize that style and get through. But if you're talking about All Japan or the World Tournament where you're having 7 fights, unless you're Valery Dimitrov and you don't feel pain in your legs, that's going to be difficult to maintain that style all the way through.
Well, he seems like he was still very thin for a heavyweight. So, before, who knows, he might get a little bit bigger and he might be able to overcome it that way. We just don't know. He's still young. Shihan's got a lot of hope in him. So, wonder what they're doing in Setagaya branch. But I think he made a big progress since I saw him fight last time. So
for sure,
yeah, it should be interesting.
And what did you think about Torda's performance?
I thought, he's actually quite amazing to watch. She's one of those where, most fights were like, is it a deja vu? Is it the same sort of fight, on and on, just different weight categories? But Torda was fighting much different with other people. And even just watching the finals, the way he kind of, spreads his kicks just with his left leg, was actually quite enjoyable to watch. I couldn't see which one's coming, left leg, body, head. And he's got a lot of, knockouts with his left leg as well, with the head kick. So I'm pretty sure that he's able to kind of, disguise it very well. And the power he has behind his punches too was actually quite interesting to watch.
Yeah, he's obviously an extremely powerful, extremely explosive fighter. I guess for him to seriously consider becoming a world champion next year, what sort of changes do you think that he needs to make within his game?
I think he's currently going with only his attacks. He was able to do that this time. He didn't really have to worry about what the other person's doing, which is going to be, I think, is a good challenge. So, last time, I think, Watanabe Yusaku was able to kind of conquer him quite comfortably, stepping around and throwing the big ones in, and he can really do his game.
Yeah.
So I think he needs to be able to kind of not just think of what he's doing, but also kind of adapt to what the other side is doing too. So, and then I think that kind of showed up when he was fighting Maeda Shota, because Maeda Shota's punches were actually, very competitive against Torda. I thought it was just that choose cost him. That's all. But I think that was probably the hardest fight he had on that day. And then that's against someone who has a solid ground and strong punches.
Yeah, I think they actually gave that punch a Genten straight off the bat. I think it was Tsukamoto Shihan who was refereeing, but you don't see that very often. But obviously it was a really big shot. Maeda puts a lot of power in his punches, and they connect to the head. They obviously do a lot of damage. But Maeda's still great to watch. He's been in the game for a very long time now. But it's really interesting to see the way that he sort of manipulates his body and is able to throw those really hard chest punches from in close. He's obviously got sort of the mechanics and the short limbs to be able to do that. But, still really enjoyable fighter to watch, I thought. And we'll move on to the female heavyweights. Obviously, Suzuki's incredible performance again. If it wasn't for her, I think the women's division as a whole would be quite competitive, but she really is just in a league of her own. Unmatchable pace and pressure and, we'll talk about it later when we get to the middleweight division, but her sister made her debut and won on debut at 15. And when they said she's only 15, I thought, oh, wow, that's a massive age difference between them. And then I had to remind myself, hold on a minute, Mihito was only 20, and yet she's accomplished so much. I think if she goes through another sort of 5-year cycle, wins a world tournament next year, and then wins everything in between and wins a world tournament again in another 4 years after that, you have to put her in GOAT category, and not just a female GOAT. I think she'll already go down as the greatest female fighter of all time, even if she goes through and wins a world tournament next year. For Fujihara, for Nomura, and some of the European fighters, what do you think someone needs to do to be able to be competitive against Suzuki? If you were training one of these girls, for example, what would you be doing? What would you be focusing on to just try to close that gap?
It's really hard to see, isn't it? She is really a kind of perfected fighter. She can do anything. And she looks like she's like a solid puncher and a low kicker, but her kicks are very sharp, like high kicks when she needs to throw them. And and then she throws a kick, and then the other person counters. She doesn't move. She's like so stable. Like that.
Yeah.
That was probably the difference between Fushihara and Suzuki. Is like Fushihara is sharp. Her hands are very fast, and then she does throw kicks. But whatever she does, Suzuki wasn't even moving, and then Suzuki just throws one knee, and Fushihara takes a massive step back. And
Mm.
then when you fight, and then when you see them trying to attack her, she takes a little step to the side, and her those chest punches, I don't know if you call chest punches or throat punches or collarbone punches are very sharp and stingy, and they're right on target. It's very hard to counter that sort of a fighter who can kind of stay there and move at the same time. And yeah, and then also, because Fujihara was punching a lot of straight punches, it opened up a lot of the body and the knees were digging in. And then she wasn't the only one. All the fight that she was having was like kind of always she was dominating by not just power, but also throwing in the right techniques at the right time. So,
Yeah.
coaching someone against Suzuki's actually quite difficult for now. I think you got to really watch carefully and try and figure out timings between her punches and kicks or something, but at the moment is she's, as you said, league of her own, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think about the European heavyweights?
So they were strong, but it's hard to see them beating Suzuki at the moment, isn't it? And then
Yeah.
Brigitte wasn't looking as sharp as I thought she was in previous years. It was
Yeah.
her last fight was she was quite flat.
Yeah.
Didn't you reckon? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually thought that Secunda won the first round fairly convincingly. It's always difficult when you're up against a favourite. You've really got to win convincingly to get the decision in the first round. But I think that she had really high work rate, really good ability to create distance, to land hard punches, had really strong knees. But she pushed it quite hard in the end of that first round, and the pacing strategy is so important, and obviously fatigued a little and allowed Brigitte to get over the top of her in that extension. But I thought Maria Segunda looked very good. I think out of all the fighters, including the other Japanese, she probably looked like the one who could give Suzuki a little bit of a run for her money, but it's obviously still a very hard task.
So, Europe and JFKO, they're completely different. Europe is not, not ashamed or not worried about giving extensions. If they have to, they'll give 3 extensions from the first round going. And then Japan is the other way around. They're desperate to give out a decision. So, depending on which country they are in, I reckon, or which organization they're fighting in, that's going to make the results a bit different, I reckon.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you're looking to level up your strength and conditioning and improve your strength, power, mobility, and stamina, check out my book, The Science of Striking. It's a 500-page comprehensive guide to sports performance for stand-up combat athletes. You can grab a copy on Amazon or head over to the Science of Striking website and use the code KDR26 for a 20% discount.
Yeah, that's very true. Moving on to the men's light heavyweight. In the JFKO, what did you think about the performance of Tsukamoto Keijiro? I mean, he's really coming into his own now. He's matured, and I think he put on a brilliant performance. What did you think about his performance?
No, I thought, of course, Tsukamoto Shihan, he said that, if Keijiro can perfect his style, he's the only one that can beat Kinzaki, which, sounds like he's got great faith in him. He's always enjoyable to watch, but because as his weight's gone up higher, he's probably, kind of held back on doing all the kicks that he has, which is a bit disappointing. We would like to see more if we can, but we understand the pressure that he's under. We can't really understand how much pressure he's under to win, with all that legacy of his dad, and so we can't say anything. But his ability to actually control the fight, I thought it was quite amazing. He doesn't really have an issue with close range, far range at the end, but I thought Kaneoka was the more kind of stronger and the more dominant. I thought he was giving more damage than Keijiro was, but at the end, that last 30-second count a little bit more. I thought, those two are very strong hopefuls. Like Kaneoka was much stronger than what he used, and he still beat Salahat like 3 years ago. So I think they have they're very hopeful in that division for the future.
Yeah, I thought Kaneoka had a brilliant performance. He was very compact, very economical with his movement, saved a lot of energy for the rush, and won through the final relatively convincingly. But Kijiro, I think, just showed a different level of maturity now and variability with his technique. He was able to use the evasive footwork, but unlike what we're talking about with Okada Yuki, he was actually able to switch to providing strong pressure and strong rush when it was required. And he also sort of progressed his fighting style over the course of the tournament. So he started off mainly with sort of punch hiza through the early rounds, and then he started to put in that yokogeri, ushirogeri, build out the sort of distance element of his game. And in the final, he started to add in some of the heel kick and some chudamoshigeri. And also varied his rush. I thought he was very sort of linear in his rush pattern on the first day, but then as the tournament progressed, he started to circle a little bit more, use more variety of technique within his rush, and just showed a very measured performance. And then, in the final, he started off very strong. And like you said, Kaneoka started to put a little bit of pressure on him and started to land some heavier shots. But then he was able to wear that. He was able to stay measured and then exploded in that last 30 seconds and won the final with a strong rush.
Yeah, so I thought that was 1 minute Keijiro, 1 minute Kaneoka, then 1 minute Keijiro. Like there was definitely a swing of moves in between the fight, which was interesting. Yeah.
And then the European light heavyweights had Patrick Lajos, and just a quick disclaimer, if we get these European names wrong in terms of pronunciation, please don't hate us. We are trying our best. But he, young, talented fighter, looked very dominant, especially in the last two fights. He had relatively easy semi-final and final. I'm not sure if he came up against opponents that were damaged from previous rounds or whether he just had extremely effective technique, but he won that final against Marek Wolny with a knee to the body, and then he won the semi-final with a calf kick, which put his opponent down very quickly, and he used that quite effectively in his quarterfinal match as well. Definitely a big prospect, but he's in a very, very difficult division. It'd be interesting to see how he would go coming up against Keijiro and also against Kinzetsuki.
No, he was most of his kicks were bases. What we saw was calf kicks. So I was thinking, the boom was starting in Europe as well with the calves.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. And then we saw Samuel Halas lose first round against Bulgarian, and it was also good to see Marek Wolny,
Still
nice and aggressive. Yeah, nice and sharp and aggressive, which is interesting to watch. So.
Yeah, Marek Wolny's an interesting one. He's quite lanky, slightly awkward fighter, but quite effective. He has those chopping low kicks. He has that sort of surprise Jordan Hize. I think because he sort of leans into his opponent, he uses that lean to sort of control their rhythm and then sort of lull them into that Jordan Hiza. He's interesting to watch. He's been around for a long time, obviously, but he's still having good results.
Yeah, he's the only one that's kind of really rough and leaning forwards in that heavyweight category of Europe, which is is always, wild and fun to watch, but it seems like everyone gives him extension after extension. So he must have been, really, really drained out by the finals. And Patrick got a little bit of a cruise through on the semis, which probably helped a bit.
Yeah, and would have been nice to see Samuel Halas go a little bit further as well. He actually fought with a broken foot, so he wasn't really able to kick. So he was just having to sort of rely on punches, and he'd also moved up a weight category from 80 to 90. So that's a big step to make when you're going into a fight injured as well.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, he did move up, didn't he? He moved up from 80 to 90. So yes. That's a big difference.
Yeah, it is for sure. And moving on to the female light heavyweight, not sure about you, but I found the women's division of the light heavyweight and the JFKO the most entertaining fight of the tournament. I think that Amikawa and Mokudai put on an amazing performance. Both of them got through the final relatively easily, but that final was an absolute cracker. I think in the first round, Ramu probably had the advantage, just had a little bit more pressure, a little bit more volume. But Yuna, who's obviously a smaller fighter, I'm not sure how much weight Ramu cuts to make that division. When you see her come up against Suzuki, she looks a lot bigger, so she's big for the division. But Yuna stayed in there. She was patient. And then I thought she won the first extension and finished off really strong in the second extension, finished with a beautiful head kick at the end of the round and took it out.
No, it was that was the that 6 minutes was worth it, I reckon. There was hardly much happening in the first 3.5. Rama kicks, get stuck, Yuna punches, they don't move, it split opens, go again. But that last extension, both of them, just going for it, it was really fun to watch.
And in the Europeans, Ivanka Popova, I think, was quite dominant in this division. She looked very good at closing and managing distance. She was very economical, tight punches, and then sort of finished with a furious rush. I think out of all the divisions, she looked the closest one to being able to take on the Japanese.
I think she was a standout in that division.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Then moving on to the men's middleweights, I thought that both tournaments wasn't the most exciting division. In the All Japan, you had Maehira moving up from 70 to 80 kilos to win a title in the second division, which is very impressive. I thought the semi-finals, we talked before about the All Japan, they're giving decisions quite quickly. I think that both semi-finals probably should have gone an extension. I think that Ushiro Sako and Yoshizawa probably deserved an extension to prove themselves there. But the final ended up being a little bit of a dull affair. But like I said, still quite impressive to see Maehira move up and win a second title.
All Japan, the middleweights were probably the most kind of close matchup they have, and it's a close matchup, and also they're not very light, so they were trying to damage each other, but then they couldn't really move away from. And I understand Ushiro Sako was very flashy, but if he does take a step back or something, then the other side is going to pressure him on, and the fight's going to be even easier. So it's very hard, and so I think it's going to be interesting how Europe's are going to cope with that sort of, squashing, closing in compared to but in comparison, the European middleweights were very exciting to watch. I mean, Salahap versus Lasha was, that was one of the highlights of the day. And then, so, but whether they're going to give him that room like last time, I think, Lasha fought Keijiro in the WKO, and it was all just getting pushed back, which wasn't, what he probably expected. So, I think that's going to be. I think that division kind of distinguishes the difference between EKO and JFKO quite a bit.
Yeah, the semi-final fight between Lasha and Hassanov was definitely the fight of the division. Would have been nice to see that in the final. Obviously, Samuel Hellis moving up to light heavyweight opened up that division a little, but Lasha looked obviously very very dominant in the final and won with a quick ippon there. And the female middleweights, we talked before about how dominant Michiro Suzuki is. When you look at siblings in sport, the Williams sisters, for example, I guess in our organisation, the Shimamoto brothers are the clearest example. The younger sibling almost always ends up becoming more successful. And this is the sibling of someone who, in a couple of years, we might be referring to as the GOAT. To think that she might actually be more successful than her sister is a pretty scary prospect. But, what a debut. I mean, coming out 15 years of age in her first senior tournament and winning that convincingly was just phenomenal. And with a different sort of style to her sister. She had that that front leg yokogeri, which the flexibility, every time she raised that front leg, it looked like she was dislocating her hip. It's a sort of flexibility you expect to see from someone, especially female fighter in primary school years, but not someone who's reached skeletal maturity. And that sort of technique doesn't necessarily win you fights, but it adds another weapon to the repertoire, and it adds a different type of feint that if you've got that threat of being able to stand toe to toe with someone and in an instant have that yokogeri up in their face, it does open up other options tactically. But I thought it was a phenomenal performance.
Oh, she was amazing. She was amazing. That's all I could say. Like getting Wazari at female, lightweight level at the early rounds is not something they haven't really seen
Yeah.
for a long time. And then that Mairi or Yokogiri, we should call, just comes out from nowhere.
Yeah.
And those techniques die out. I'm pretty sure all the other girls that have come through the ranks
Yeah.
have had it while they were young.
That's
But
true.
they have to sacrifice something as they go through. They need more stability, they need more punch, low kicks to try and withstand the other side. And then from nowhere, this girl just she's got all of them plus those head kicks when she needs them. And then the moment they go and block him, she's got Shitasuke and he's had to just get the openings out. And then we didn't see any sort of uncomfortable moments with her winning, which the other person was uncomfortable all the way. No, I thought that was amazing. Yeah.
And in the European tournament, especially in that division, yeah, the girls looked a lot bigger. But there's a big difference in speed and output between Europe and Japan. Especially clear in this fight. You have those gaps. You have attack, 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 and then rest, attack, attack, rest. Whereas in Japan, it's just a continuous flow from one combination from one opponent to the other. That back and forth just doesn't stop.
Was it Miriam Bjorkgren that won it? It was the Swedish lady, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So she needs space to attack, and the Japanese girls won't give her that space.
Not
So,
giving you space, no, for sure. And the male lightweights, in New Japan, I thought Otsubo was one of the standout performances of the day. He's just very technically sound. Like you said, there was a clear winner in each division, and he was definitely a level above. I think the quarterfinals against Ishiguro was probably the closest fight, but he had this well-timed rush that sort of got him over the line in an otherwise fairly competitive match. The final, who did he fight? Murata Tese.
Murata Tese, yeah.
16-year-old. I think he looked incredibly sound technically, very tall for a lightweight. But yeah, I think Otsubo was just a level above, and his experience really showed through. And also, not just you're very strong and technical, but also extremely confident. There are a few moments in the match where he just sort of stopped fighting and lulled the other opponents into stopping as well, and then the referee would step in and say, it was all like he was dictating not only the pace of the fight, but also any gaps in the fight, just by doing what he wanted to do.
That guy was the typical sort of ideal southpaw fighter. Drive that left straight into the chest, and then his well-timed back leg low kick was it was very well-timed on all the fights I saw. And then so that kind of actually stopped the other side from being able to move. And then every single time he was able to get that left low kick in to the back leg of the other side, which I thought was very tactically clever. And especially Murata, he was coming up, still young, very thin, and chest punches is always going to be the key. So he from the quarterfinals onwards, all the other guys are punching him in the chest like crazy, and his techniques with Shitazuki, Hizagiri, Maigiri, he's very exciting to watch. He's going for the knockouts with his kicks, which is head kicks, which is always a great thing to see. At least someone different. He's always very aggressive, but probably I'm pretty sure there was accumulated damage on his chest, in the final, and also we just kept on banging him there. And it's probably a couple of years, and not maybe one more year until he can really adapt to that sort of condition of his body from the junior protective ranks to the no shin pads and gloves seniors. But I think he's a very strong hope that Japan has. It's very exciting to watch, and
and we'll probably end up in heavier weight divisions as he fills out as well.
Probably, yeah.
And the 70 kilo division European tournament, I think that was the strongest division overall, and the final was my favourite fight of the tournament, between Hasanov and Matthias Dinowitz. Both of them had really good footwork, good pressure. They're tough, good stamina, distance awareness. I thought that was a really competitive match.
Yeah, Matthias won the open division of the Kokoro Cup, didn't he? Which is just crazy if you think about it, when he's 70 kilos and he's fighting all these heavyweights, and then
he looks big for 70 kilos. I'm not sure how much weight he cuts, but he does look massive for that division.
He's a brown belt, isn't he? So it's just interesting to see how he's going.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very impressive. And what do you think about the women's light middleweights?
Watanabe and Sakai, yeah. So Watanabe transferred over to Shinkyokushin from Sotenjuku, did she?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They get a lot in Fukuoka, don't they? They got Araki, Minamihara, yeah.
It was an interesting one. The interesting use of the video replay. This is obviously the way that all sport is going, and I think in the interest of fairness to the competitors, it's a good thing to utilize. I think they did a better job of coming to quicker decisions this time. I think in the World Tournament last year, there were decisions that took a long time to make, and from a crowd's perspective, it's not great when you're sitting around waiting for 5 minutes for them to make a decision. So I think that was much better this time. I'm not sure about this one. I think you probably still need to have a few more camera angles to make it as effective and as efficient as possible. This case, it looked like the punch went to the throat, also collarbone area, but Sakai grabbed her face, and I think there is a different sort of reaction that you see from fighters, whether they get punched cleanly in the face or in that sort of collarbone throat area. At the same time, it was a really impressive performance by Watanabe, first time winning, and she looked like she punched extremely hard, which is why that punch did so much damage. But it was a very strong performance nonetheless.
To be honest, I enjoyed Sakai's fighting style a little bit. It was close to like Akimoto's style. I think she's from Shukai, wasn't she? Like the middle kicks, and she was actually swinging her kicks around, and her punches were, it wasn't, numbers wasn't as much as quantity wise as much as Watanabe, but Sakai's, punches were actually going for the knockouts. So it was two different comparisons of fighting styles, but at the end, you have to try and stay in your ground and fight and throw as much numbers as you can to win the judges over your side. Yeah. Which, sometimes is very hard when they can't really give enough damage over just 2 minutes. But I thought, it was a good comparison between two different types of fighting.
And similar sort of thing in the European tournament in the same division. In the final, there seemed to be a foul that was replayed a lot online. Haven't been able to find the full footage of the fight, but it looked like there was a chewy there that was debated as well.
I gotta go back in memory, but I can't remember. But that was was it Ukraine and Hungary?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, nonetheless, Istebsa from Ukraine, really solid, strong pressure fighter. I think that's one division where they may be sort of closing the gap on the Japanese.
But again, those who won the Europeans this year didn't do very well in the WKO last year. So we'll see how much they've adapted.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and the men's lightweights in the All Japan. We talked off the top about how high the level was in this division and how close everything was, and the pace of it, and how hard it is to make a decision with 2-minute rounds. In the quarterfinals, it was difficult to separate anyone, but as the tournament sort of progressed, you saw Sawai Tenchin use his experience and good distance control and ability to dictate when to sort of change that distance, and that experience and maturity, I think, sort of got him through those later rounds. But, looking over the draw, I think the average age of the competitors in this division was definitely under 18. They're all kids. What did you think about this division?
It's like, because I used to be like, was still under 70 kilos, but I used to be lightweight as well. And then it's so different. I remember the transition. So when I first fought, my All Japan debut was in 2002. You go there, they still had like half the draw you can kind of ignore if you want to go up the ladder. Like 30-year-olds, definitely looking like business and fighting each other, and then talking at the back of the stadium saying, "Oh, that kick was nice. Yeah, your punches are strong." You don't get that anymore. Like since that start of the youth program, all the fighters, all the teenagers, everyone's eager to win, so there's no room for rest from round number one. So that the lightweights they take forever especially on the first day, extension after extension, round after round. So within that, Sawai being able to consistently win is actually quite it's not easy. So I think he's doing a great job doing that. And then, as you said, I think maturity kind of plays where he needs to go, where he can pull back and minimize sort of all the fatigue and damage. I think even though everything was very close, it was actually quite, not, I wouldn't say dominant, but he comfortably kind of won the division. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the European tournament, these guys that look like they're hitting a little bit harder than Japanese and quite technical, sort of good use of footwork, but they sort of don't quite have the speed and the output of the Japanese.
Yeah, that was a Georgian-dominated division, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. I think 3 of the top 4 were Georgian.
Yeah, so they based their theory is probably more on power more than speed and movement. So I think Zinchenko broke Hosokawa's ribs last time in the light middleweights, and then that's the sort of power they're all after. So again, that's another one. That's a comparison between Japan and Europe. Very different approach to how they're going to fight. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Migladze, I think he probably should have won the first round in the final. I think that probably didn't need an extension. Had strong pressure, good counters on the forefoot, able to establish position and then sort of react by countering their attacks. I think that he looked quite dominant, but yeah, like you said, it is a very different style to the Japanese.
So Mindia came third in the WKO as well, so he's probably not a guy to kind of ignore. He's going to be
for sure
one to watch out for future. So, I mean. It was, how can I say, like the way they approach the fighting. If you just watch the differences, it's going to be up to the judges to decide how they wanted to play out. So probably if they're fighting like last time, like in Poland, they might try and catch you out on the pushing and grabbing a little bit more. But this is JFKO. They allowed a lot of pushing and grabbing, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they were quite lenient with the fouls in this tournament, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I hate to see it when the fouls decide the fights. If there's a big head punch and, it clearly compromises one fighter, that's understandable, if that's sort of a careless mistake. But if there's a little bit of push and shove and a little bit of hooking from both fighters and one gets penalised and then they lose the fight because of that, I always think that is a little bit sad.
And probably last year in WFKO, a lot of the fights were decided over the chewy, so they might have put that into consideration and and then got a little more lenient with the fouls. But that made it a little bit more, I don't know, exciting to watch compared to last year. I reckon everyone was able to go for a little bit more. So I thought that was a good change. I mean, it makes the definition of the rules a little bit harder to explain, but from watching perspective, I think that was a good step forward.
Yeah, for sure. And then what do you think about the female lightweights in All Japan?
All Japan, especially the 2 in the finals, they were actually throwing heavy shots in compared to like the past years where they were just tapping each other for the whole six. They were actually which was, I was actually surprised. They were actually, really going for the damage, which is a bit of difference between, compared to the previous years. I thought that was good to see.
Yeah, I thought especially and especially in the final, she was really loading up on those punches, sort of using a little bit of different footwork, sort of stepping back slightly on each punch to give herself a little bit of range and space and increase the power in the punch. And I thought that she was quite competitive and kind of ahead for a lot of the match, but then Mori just sort of used her experience, winning for the second time in a row, and just managed to outrush her at the end. But and so only 19, I think she's going to be very competitive in the future.
The rushes were, that Mori's rush at the end, that did make a big difference. That was a big decider. Until then, they were both, they had their good times and bad times, but that rush, moving side to side and then, hitting from up and down, that rush is very, probably hard to adapt, not adapt to, but, to counter.
Yeah. And then the European tournament, Brigitte Svinkonaite, again, really strong pressure and work rate. I think that was a very impressive performance from her.
Her knees were very sharp and accurate, dug right underneath, and it was very hard for them to kind of, put any sort of tactical reactions against that. She was, popping in quite, frequently. And then, when that happens, when you try and make room for your punches, especially that it was Ukraine, I forgot her name, but
yes, Veresniak from Ukraine. Yeah.
Yes. She needs to swing her hands. So, I thought, but again, that girl lost to Sawai in the first round of WFKO, didn't she? So see what happens next time.
Terrific. So that wraps up our coverage of those two tournaments. We've got the KCC coming up already next month, which we're obviously really excited about. What are your predictions there? We don't have the draw yet, do we?
All we know is Mache is fighting Torda first round, so that moves them up to the quarters. I think that's all we know so far.
Yeah, which is a little bit weird having an elimination fight for an 8-man event, but anyway.
Yeah, I know.
And even with that fight, those who fought in the World Tournament, correct?
Yeah, so Torda's debut in the World, he stopped Mache. So that was the big upset that happened.
Yeah, massive upset. How do you think that fight will play out this time?
So if Mazur's going to take a little bit longer to adapt to Torda, probably Torda's going to wrap it up in 3 minutes. Yeah. So, but again, if Mache's attacks are stronger than what Torda's going to expect, we might be able to see a little bit more of an exchange in the middle. But I think Mache's always a slow starter, so that's always been his key factor for him to actually move up or down. Every single time he loses, it's when his engine's not revved up, and then before you know, time's up. So hopefully that doesn't happen with Torda, because Torda's ready to go from the first second that my fight starts. So that should be interesting. But what do you reckon who's going to win?
Yeah, I think based on recent form, I think Kinzeski's going to be very difficult to beat. Yeah, he's obviously sort of mastered that style against the Japanese. It'd be interesting to see how he goes if he comes up against some of those bigger Europeans. I think he lost to Aventus in the last KCC.
Yes,
from memory.
Yes.
He's obviously made a lot of improvements physically, technically, tactically. So it'd be really interesting to see how he gets on. And it'd be interesting to see also how the genius of Tsukamoto Shihan is preparing his students to take these guys on. It was obviously a massive moment having two of his students lose to Kinzeski and allowing this foreigner to be the first non-Japanese All Japan champion. So looking forward to seeing what master plan he's cooking up.
No, I can't really, see how it's going to turn out. It's very unpredictable. We don't know how everyone's progressing. So I know we're just going to be there and really enjoy the night. I reckon it's going to be really exciting to watch that KCC.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can catch up again and have a talk about that tournament afterwards. It's been great having you on and getting your insights into these fights. I always enjoy talking to you about fighting.
Yeah, well, we're really looking forward to that one.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time, Yasu. It's been great getting your insights. Always enjoy speaking about fighting with you, and it's been good to go in depth, and hopefully look forward to doing it again.
Thank you very much.
To everyone for listening. Hope it wasn't too boring for anyone, but I'm sure there's some other knockdown fighting nerds out there that enjoyed it. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to speaking to you next time. Awesome.
All right, thank you very much. Awesome.